Let's talk about small group communication. It's a very important topic. One of my favorite examples of the dilemmas facing small group communication occurred in a class many years ago, and a student just said, I hate working in small groups and I don't want to participate. I asked him what his major was, and he said it was civil engineering. And I paused. I thought, oh dear, can you imagine a civil engineer building a bridge alone? Would you want to drive over that bridge? I wouldn't want to drive over a bridge. Small groups are necessary. Using civil engineering is a great example. You cannot have one person working all alone, designing, planning, constructing that bridge. People need to work together. So why do we have small groups? Well, we talked about this in the class. Is that the diversity of perspectives, the diversity of points of view, all come into play. But we need to acknowledge there are some problems that are inevitable with small groups. Everybody's favorite is there will be one member of the group who does nothing. Absolutely nothing. And what do we do when that happens? The bad news is we do that person's work for that person, because it doesn't matter what the project is. If it's an ad campaign, if it's a report for a board of trustees, nobody wants to hear that Section 18 isn't done because person X didn't show up to the meetings. That just doesn't work. So when there's somebody who's a member of a small group who's not doing the work, the other members just have to do it for the person. So what do you do then? Do you run to the supervisor and say, we're going to have to make up a name here. I hope it's not a name. Gwendolyn never showed up. Gwendolyn didn't do her share. We all had to do Gwendolyn's work for her. Well, okay, so let's be real. Does the supervisor want to hear that information? Yeah, to some extent. Chances are the supervisor already knows that Gwendolyn doesn't do anything. It's probably not the first time Gwendolyn hasn't done something. And there may well be some personnel actions going on in the background that can't be discussed with everybody in the office. So you could gently tell somebody, just, oh, by the way, just so you know, that we missed out on Gwendolyn during this experience, but everything turned out okay. Everything is fine, and just leave it at that. That's usually the best way to handle the Gwendolyns. And I do hope nobody out there is named Gwendolyn. If there is somebody out there named Gwendolyn, it's not you. That's a fabricated person. So don't worry, I'm not thinking about you. What are some other things that happen with small groups? Well, you got your different roles, and I like to argue that all the roles are important. So you have the make nice person. This is the person that's not coming up with the brilliant ideas, not coming up with solutions to problems. This is the person who brings the donuts. And is there anything wrong with that? Actually, I would say no. I mean, that's the make nice person in a group, and everybody can't be the group leader. My God, have you ever been in a group where everybody wanted to be in charge? That can be unbearable. It's better if people just sort of fall into their natural roles and do what they're good at. Some people are good at generating ideas. Some people are good at keeping everybody on task. Some people are good at taking notes. Some people are good at making everybody feel good about being in the group, and that's an important role too. So when we form these groups, we like to look for multiple roles and some diversity in roles, and make sure that we avoid groupthink. That's the worst. The groupthink, of course, is when everybody agrees for the sake of agreeing, when cohesion is more important than critical thinking. And that's when the student government leaders all decide that it would be a great idea to have the next meeting in Hawaii. Oh, doesn't that sound great? And somebody needs to speak up and say, that might not look so great in the paper, right? So maybe we should rethink that idea. Groupthink is when cohesion is more important than critical assessment of ideas. What are some other things about groups that have come up in our discussions? No, I'm thinking.
I have a question, actually.
Oh, good. We have a question. This is so exciting. All right.
My question is about the person the Gwendolyn's of the bunch. Not to go too deeply, but what do you think motivates or doesn't motivate that person? Is it manipulative, or is it innocent, or is it a mix?
I love this question.
And would you ever confront?
Yes, I would confront. But first, it's not safe to assume. I mean, Gwendolyn could have an aging parent that she's taking care of, or a sick child, or something just really horrible. And it would have helped if she had come to the group and said, all right, everybody, I've got a situation you're not going to believe, but here it is. And I'm going to have to ask for some forgiveness over the next 2 weeks because I'm going to be distracted and oftentimes unavailable. And here's why. Here's what I'm going to do to see if I can help out with this. Sadly, we don't always have the wherewithal to do that. So sometimes people just suffer in silence and they don't show up and never tell anybody. So it's sort of like, somebody is late. Don't you always think, well, maybe they were hit by a car. So I'm not going to be mad until I find out if they were in fact hit by a car. All right. So what do you do? How do you phrase it? Yes, there are ways, definitely. Usually not in public and usually not in shaming, but it would just be sort of a direct conversation from somebody in the group who has a fairly easygoing personality to say, Gwendolyn, you missed the last 2 meetings and you were late actually for the one before. And is there anything going on? Because we're doing your work for you and we want to make sure you do understand that. And then take the conversation from there. Chances are, though, because we've all met these people, usually they're non-responsive and they're like, oh, I know, right? Okay, you've heard this. Oh, I know. Geez, last week it was the grocery store and there was such a long line and I had to get the milk because, the kids were waiting for me. And the week before that, I ran out of gas. I've run out of gas, so I can speak to this. It's bad planning, right? I mean, it's not like the needle comes out of nowhere. And same with a flat tire. I mean, a flat tire is not necessarily a good excuse because chances are the threads were bare. And so people who are responsible, right, keep the gas tank full and keep the tires in good shape so that they're not the ones with the flat tire. Again, I need to confess, I've run out of gas as an adult, not a teenager, as a fully grown adult, thinking, oh, I'll get there. It's really horrible. So yes, confront the person gently, nicely. I wouldn't turn it into a great big battle. It's not worth it, and it will come to no good end. Gently inquire to see if there is a personal situation. And then, if it's irresponsibility, just remember, irresponsibility does not ever recognize itself. It will always have a reason, always. And there's no fight in that. It does become a personnel issue. And so hopefully it'll work out in that regard. But, let's be real. Sometimes Gwendolyn is the granddaughter of the guy who founded the company, right? So don't hold your breath. There probably won't be a big personnel action there. Maybe some stock. But not the kind of personnel action you want. Oh, that's good. All right. What's another question?
Do you have any advice or insight for students or people in the working world who kind of need to make a leap from a maintenance role or a shy person into a group lead, whether they're thrust into it by their instructor who says, okay, so-and-so, you're going to be the leader, or whether they want to take on more responsibility at work to show their supervisor that they can assume the role.
This, we just did
Not
this.
their nature.
I'm also, right now, I'm teaching Communication 100, Introduction to Human Communication. And in class last week, we tried a different kind of exercise where I gave each student in the room a piece of paper, and it gave them their new name and some of their personality characteristics. And the students had to perform these new roles. So, get out of your own skin and try being somebody else. It didn't work all that well, to be honest, but I'm going to continue reapproaching it, because this notion of acting is something that we do need to learn how to do. So say, for example, I'm normally a person who's just very shy. I like to let somebody else lead. And I like to follow that person who's leading. Sometimes that can be just great. But say I enter a group and either there's one dysfunctional person who wants to be an autocratic leader, or say more likely there's nobody who wants to be the group leader. All right, so what do I have to do? I have to step up to the plate and say, I will hit this ball. Trying to keep the metaphor going. I will be the leader, even though I don't feel particularly comfortable being a leader. I need to act like a leader. So we're back to the performance strategy, that I need to think about what leaders I admire do, and I need to remember all of that and embody it, act it out in that situation. Same thing, if I feel comfortable being a leader, but there are 3 of us in the group who all feel comfortable being the leader, I might have to say that in that group, I'm going to step back and I'm not going to be the leader. And I'm going to have to assume a personality of sorts that is not the one I prefer. And again, that's a real talent. That's one of those skills that the workforce needs. People who are able to have a natural role, but able to step into another kind of role if needed. Sometimes that there's room for that nice person. So you've got a group that's full of friction. I might notice all that friction and say, all right, I'm going to step back and I'm going to play the role of congeniality. And I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get all of these warring factions to get along. And yeah, is it acting? Yes. Is it real? Yes, it's very real. That's a great skill to develop and to think about how you would develop a full, or not a full range, but a set of roles that you can play. And so that when you enter a small group and say, this group needs a leader, I can step in, I can play that role. This group needs an idea generator, and I'll play that role. This group needs a secretary, a recorder, somebody who's going to take all the notes. And that's my least favorite role, but I can do it if I have to. If nobody else is willing to do it, I can step in and I can play that role too. So that we often talk, about how do these courses in the liberal arts prepare us for workplace environments. And this is a great example, is that if we understand the dynamics of small group communication, we can think about those dynamics and the roles and the interactions and the behaviors, and develop a repertoire of skills that we can bring to any working environment, and that the employers like this. The employers like people who are able to play multiple roles and do all sorts of things in different ways.
So another question, shifting gears a little bit to nonverbal communication, which is another topic that that was covered just in the past couple of weeks. I think one of the things that comes up oftentimes is, obviously, if you're face to face with someone, you can misinterpret their nonverbal gestures and so forth. But what about the impact of technology on communication? I know that that's probably a larger topic, but I think it's something that everyone contends with, whether it's that email where the tone seems to be one thing, but really is another, or the text message or what have you. How do you handle, or what are some sort of pitfalls and guidelines for shorthand communication, whether it's things like texting or longer like email, where you don't have the benefit of being face to face?
Yeah, technology changes everything, and technology changes nothing. At the core, the communication dynamics are the same. That meaning is co-constructed, and that people encode and decode messages in cultural contexts in order to assign meaning to various communicative behaviors, and that we need to be absolutely vigilant of how our messages might get interpreted, verbal and nonverbal. So that part doesn't change across technologies. But obviously that the contemporary communication technologies create different rates of change, there are different paces of communication, different lots of nonverbal factors that come into play, and the channels change. So these are all things to think about. With nonverbal communication, it's such a large topic, and I know that we just introduced it in this course here. But go ahead and think about the full range of ways we communicate nonverbally. So there are, of course, as we discussed in class, gestures and kinesics, eye expressions, facial expressions, smiles, emblems, all sorts of things. But also think about how technologies become in and of themselves communicative. So in the old days, we used to say, oh, well, that person's just a car dater. Do you know what a car dater is? It's somebody who wants to date somebody who drives a Jaguar. And so that's a car dater. And today, what's the difference between a Rolex watch and a Timex? Well, they both tell time. They're both accurate. But why would somebody spend $10,000 on a Rolex when you could get a Timex for $39.88? Well, because the Rolex sends a message. I put on the Rolex to let you know I have access to disposable income. I'm trying to send a message. You know what? Sometimes people say, no, the Rolex tells better time. They bought the Rolex so that you knew that they have money. And that's fine. That's why people buy all sorts of things, to send a message so that other people receive that message. All right, now, but what are some of the modern technologies that people are using in interesting communicative ways? And yeah, I mean, so let's begin with the people who are still using their flip phones. And they are you out there? There may be some out there. Okay. Oh my gosh, we got three, no, four flip phone people. That's good. Yeah, what is that saying? What is that saying? It's saying, well, first of all, it's saying, please don't send me any photos because they're very expensive to download. And second, it's saying, no, I'm not buying into this. Every year a new phone, every year a new technology, every year I'm in control of the rate at which my communication changes. And that's a very nice message. Brian, I know what are you thinking about all this in the relationship between technology, nonverbal communication, and some of the more unusual dynamics that we're seeing going on right now? I'm putting you on the spot.
Able to speak. I don't know. Brian, are you able to speak? I don't know if your mic is your mic working?
Can you hear me? We cannot hear you. No. So this is an excellent demonstration. Here we have an excellent demonstration of the relationships between technology, verbal and nonverbal communication. Brian is on the screen typing saying, can you hear me? I can hear you. That's verbal communication, right? Because it's language. It's the use of language. There are nonverbal elements going on, including silence that you're probably hearing, little icons that you might be seeing, and the sense, I bet you detected the lack of technological capacity upon your colleagues here in the office. And I bet you assigned some meaning to that. Idiots. My mic is on, so I'm not sure why you can't hear me. That's what Brian just typed.
So we'll mute ours and see if that makes. Well, if he wants to, he can put something. See where my mouse is? You can put something in the chat box if he wants.
Oh.
Sure.
Now, can people in YouTube land see the chat box?
They can't see our internal chat box. We can tell them.
I can tell you what it says. Brian just said, sure. I don't know what inflection he was using, right? It's hard to capture inflection in written word, but we leave that to our novelists and poets because oftentimes they can insert inflection. So technology, nonverbal communication, what are some other topics? Brian, what are some of the topics you're seeing emerge in the discussion boards or exercises? Technology is really interesting in the way it affects communication. Exactly. It's hard to interpret inflections through CMC or computer-mediated communication. And I wonder if this is what gave rise to the emojis, right? That the emojis are there because it's so hard to insert inflection. Misunderstandings are easy to happen when not face-to-face. Absolutely. The abbreviations in text can be kind of funny. There's another thing that occurs that we need to watch out for is when you have one of these programs on your cell phone that autofills words, right? And all of a sudden you are typing a word like, I don't know, I can't think of an example right now, but you've been there. I know you've all been there, where you type a word and it fills in another word for you. And it's like, no, I didn't want to say that. Yep. Okay, here's Brian's saying, even emojis can be used differently by different people. I know some people use emojis that seem inappropriate, especially because the emojis look different on Android and Apple phones. I did not know that. I did not know that. So you could, Brian, could you insult somebody without knowing it? And if you can think of an example, that would be great. Or if you can think of an example of an autofill that got you into trouble, that would be possibly. Brian is thinking.
I had one a while ago.
Oh, good. Okay, Jill has one. Can everybody hear Jill?
I think they should be able to. So I've been working with Fred and Brian on the course. I work with faculty members, and I had one who sent me what I thought was the emoji for poo, and it was really just bees buzzing around a hive. So I completely misinterpreted her message and thought it was kind of an inappropriate use of that. But then we had a phone conversation follow-up, and we had a good laugh over it. So there's one that looks a little bit different on your phones. Buyer beware.
Wow. You mean Winnie the Pooh?
No, I mean like the poo.
Pooh, like,
Yeah,
like fecal matter.
Fecal matter. Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that's what she had sent me, and I didn't see the little bees buzzing around the hive, and that's what she had really intended.
Wow.
And so it was a very different, being on the receiving end of that was very...
Now, did somebody ask the other who initiated the inquiry to say, what did you send me? I'm not sure I understand the message.
Oh, yeah, we had a follow-up phone conversation, and I said, oh, it seems like you were a little bit frustrated. You know, I noticed your emoji, how can I help? And she said, oh, that was just bees buzzing around, you know, a hive, you know, honey, you know, sweetness. I'm like, oh, it did not come across that way.
Wow.
So visually, and then I took a closer look, and I said, "Oh, well, maybe so," but it was still. We had a good laugh over it. So
right,
it was fine.
but I mean, that's really interesting. It's also good. It's a great example of why it's important to use verbal communication to unpack some of the complexities of nonverbal. So from Brian, different smiley faces, or like a cringe face too. Sometimes when you get a weird emoji back, it violates expectations on what you think the response should be, and it throws you off a little bit. Well, that's the truth. And you can hurt feelings, or, gosh, I mean, I could just see it. You'd be puzzled. I would be puzzled. I would be thinking, did I miss something? What happened here?
I must say I use many more emojis and exclamation points now so that I can communicate enthusiasm or more of a lighthearted nature, because sometimes just having a period at the end of the sentence can be misinterpreted as just something, you know,
yes.
else.
Now, do you have any exclamation point friends where in an email every single sentence yes. ends with an exclamation point? What is your reaction when you get those?
I think it's, I wonder if they put much thought into it. There's no meaning behind it, basically.
Yeah, they lose.
It's a throwaway.
It's a throwaway. And I find it, so in formal writing, right, we don't use exclamation points. In a letter, you know, on your company's letterhead, I would be surprised to hear you used an exclamation point, because that's usually not what we do in formal writing. But then sometimes in emails, it's like, well, you're trying to say, I'm happy, I'm just being direct. But the exclamation point doesn't really communicate that. It just becomes, it can become very annoying, actually. But emojis, that's why I think emojis are so popular, is that they do or can communicate nuance. What else are you seeing out there, Brian?
We can always
yeah. Well, I hope the course is going well for anybody who's listening to this midterm here. We're actually a little bit over half, I believe. Yeah, so thank you, everybody, and send us questions, please. All right, signing out.